And we're here again with Mrs Akili Joseph from or should I say Mrs Akili? Since I become a teacher in 2014 in the Ministry of Education, I does not to say, so Mrs Akili Joseph, supposed to be the thing to say if you are married and your surname changed to Joseph from, right?
But the easiest thing to go is just Miss, like MS.
Yes.
Miss.
But you're still a teacher, so right? It's just a Miss, right? So
in general, if you don't know if a woman is married or not, just go with Miss.
Just go with Miss.
But
I have been corrected by some tanties already. They take it personally. They're like, Mrs.
Put some respect.
Like, all right, I didn't know. How am I to know?
Yeah, a small thing.
Sorry, so CSEC Biology Live Enzymes with Mrs Akili Joseph. Before we begin, let me just say this. One time you all asked on Instagram for a 12-hour crash course of bio, 12-hour. So, yep, Miss Akili is going to do it along with the next bio teacher in the student hub, Miss Crystal Ibrahim. I'm going to say Crystal first name. I must think I pronounce it properly. All right, but yeah, our top 2 bio teachers in the student hub going to be handling that for us. It's on Sunday and it starts at 9 a.m., right?
9
a.m. That's tomorrow is Saturday and the day after that is Sunday. So all you really have just on Saturday to subscribe. Just now I don't have my editors and them here, boy. Bang, okay. Oh gosh. Okay. So Sunday from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. that's 12 hours. You can WhatsApp the number below to join. But you know we're doing things for the people online still, so we're gonna start in like a few minutes, maybe a minute. So just to repeat, this is the bio 12-hour crash course. And at that time, we also have the AdMaths 12-hour crash course. I am doing that myself. That is tomorrow. Please God. Mrs Akili is here and she's the one who teaches HSB as Ilian asking, do HSB please.
I see a couple requests for the HSB.
And there was a lot on Instagram. So, you know, if you have an next 12 hours in your tank, Akili, we'll see.
We'll talk.
Yeah, so bio is on Sunday. AdMaths is tomorrow. Please God, WhatsApp this number. Jump into that. The 12-hour crash courses have been proven to be a success. Well, except the maths, they throw out paper too. So all the hard work went down the drain. But anyhow, let's jump into it. So you'll have to zoom in on your end to kind of type and thing, but I'll be doing this zoom in here. Figure, that's supposed to be figure 1, shows the effect of temperature on the rate at which starch is broken down by the enzyme. I am predicting, and what's that? Amylase?
Yeah.
Still know it, boy. Amylase.
So, oh, I didn't realize that cropped badly on my side. So it was me, right? So for today, guys, we're going to be discussing enzymes, and we're just discussing some enzymes. But obviously, on Sunday for the 12-hour crash course, you get in all 3 sections, past papers galore, covering the entire thing, right? Which we will do a little bit more of the enzymes as well. We're touching it on Sunday as well, but just to give you a little bit more detail, right? So the thing with enzymes, a lot of students tend to misunderstand when we move away from the theory of enzymes. So we know that enzymes are biological catalysts, which means that they are naturally produced in the body and they help to speed up chemical or metabolic reactions. To the point that if we did not have enzymes, we would not be alive. Just all the chemical reactions that are necessary for us to live, it will not occur fast enough for us to be able to remain in this lifetime without them, right? The thing is, all of our enzymes are proteins, and because they are proteins, all the sensitivities that proteins are sensitive to, enzymes will be sensitive to. So proteins and enzymes, they're very finicky about what pH the environment is. pH is a measure of acidity, right? So you have your pH scale going from 0 to 14, with the lower side being acidic and the upper range, 7 and above. So 7 and below is acidic, going down to a very, very acidic, down to the to the lowest, and then going up from 7 would be your alkaline or your basic pH, right? So different enzymes like different pH environments, and they will work best in whatever environment that they like, right? The same thing that they're very finicky about is temperature. They will be best at a particular temperature, and then how well they work is affected by if you decrease or increase the temperature. So with that, you have a bunch of experiments that you had to learn about how to prove that temperature would affect enzyme activity, or that pH would affect enzyme activity. And so you kind of have theory about enzymes, but when it comes to putting that into practice, into working through experiments, that's where students can kind of get a bit confused, right? So this first graph here, what I want you to really appreciate from this graph is, one, the shape of it. You see it goes up and it comes down, right? On your x-axis, you have a variety of temperature. So you're starting from 0 all the way up to 60 degrees. And on your y-axis, the rate of reaction.
Okay.
So they're saying that when you increase the temperature from 0 degrees to 10 degrees, the rate of the reaction goes up.
Right.
Yeah. Then when you increase it from 10 to 20, it goes up even further. So it's going up all the way from 0 degrees to about, we've seen that max there at about 35, right? You see the max at that range there. So this crop is really bad,
That's okay.
You're not trying to see the question.
How the temperature? Temperature values for the graph.
If I remember correctly, what they want you to do now is to take they want you to draw a table based on the graph, right? And students get real tired for this. Like, what am I supposed to do? This is so hard. How am I supposed to know what values they use to generate the graph, right? But it is really easy and simple. And the relationship between a graph and a table is straightforward, right? So generally, when they give you a table and they ask you to plot a graph, they would usually give you at least 2 columns. The first column of that table is usually going to be what is on your x-axis. So if you have a graph and you have to draw a table, then you're going to put in the first column what is on your x-axis, right? So for 4 marks, you want to at least pull 4 data points from your graph, right? So you're going to have your table, and I'm going to put temperature first, degrees Celsius, and then you have the second will be, which is on the y-axis, your rate of reaction, which has a unit of milligrams per minute, right? So, you would have your nice straight lines. Mr. Springer, you're always on my straight line, but, that goes on. Yeah. So the easy thing you have to do here, and now you could pick any 4 figures and put in this table, right? But make your life easy, right? So just pick square, like nice, so main figures. Like I would just go 10, 20, 30, 40, right? Or 20, 30, 40, 50. But you have some people who want to be creative and they want to use 15 and 23, but we ain't going through all that, right? So say you use 20, 30, 40, 50, you're going to go to your x-axis now and go up to your line and where you're going to cross that graph, right? So say you have 20 here. Let me use a different. Yeah. So we use 20 as the first one. So we're going to go up from this point and then go across. Are you helping me out there? Right? And then we're going to go across, looking at 20, 25, 26, 27 milligrams per minute. That's the rate, right?
So that goes here, 27. Yeah, okay. Let me knock off
And
this
then,
quickly.
Yeah.
So the 30
So you do
would
that,
come
and that's all they really ask you for.
41. The 40 came to 35. I should show the lines. And the 50 came to 12.
Right? So that is your table there, nice and easy. It's a good format that people either get all of or none of, because they don't to show what the question was really asking. Right? The next thing, part 2, they want you to be able to describe the trend in enzyme activity as shown by the graph in figure 1. Right? So this is a skill that would apply for enzyme questions and basically any graph question that you get, right? So the trend is you're going to see what is the relationship between whatever the factor is on your x-axis and whatever the factor is on your y-axis. So we basically have two things happening here, right? From 0 to 35, we see in a certain activity. So if we look up here, from 0 to 35, the general trend.
Undo, just press undo. Ctrl Z.
Yeah. I was looking for the pointer. Right? From 0 up to about 35, right? Yeah, the trend is as the temperature is increasing, we're seeing the rate of the reaction getting higher or going up, right? So as temperature increases, the rate of the reaction increases. So that's the general trend for the first half of the graph. And then after that peak, that maximum rate of 45 milligrams per minute, which I would say use that figure, right? So the rate of the reaction increases as temperature increases to a max of, and you put 45 milligrams per minute. And then beyond that, the rate of the reaction climbed significantly once the temperature was increased further.
So rate of reaction increases as the temperature increases.
Right? So
up to
as temperature increases, your rate of increasing
up to a
max
rate or a max of what? 45, whatever it was, milligrams per minute.
Milligrams per minute.
At 35 degrees Celsius or so. Well, the question kind of hinting 37 more. And then you had to talk about this, then it increases.
Right, and then you talk about the second half here now. About the usually you would observe that decline being much sharper or quicker decline than you would see the increase or the going up, right? And that is because enzymes like an increased temperature, optimal temperature. The optimal temperature is the temperature they're the best at. They're going to have the highest rate of reaction. That is this.
Where's that optimal temperature? Optimal is the word you use?
Yeah.
Optimal.
Right? After that, it usually gets too hot for the physical structure of the enzyme, the protein nature of the enzyme. The protein starts to get affected by temperatures beyond the optimum temperature. So what that would mean is that enzymes work by holding a particular shape, right? They keep a particular shape. That's how well they work, right? When the temperature goes beyond the optimum temperature, the protein structure isn't able to maintain the same shape that the enzyme is supposed to have. And once that shape is compromised, the enzyme becomes denatured and is no longer able to catalyze the reaction efficiently. And that is what causes your rate of reaction to plummet, right? So what you're having after you see that maximum rate of reaction, after you see that optimum temperature that is ideal for this particular enzyme, after that, that rapid decline that you observe after is due to the denaturing of the enzyme. So that part 3
Hold on, somebody is saying this should be 35. Well, this is the rate I'm talking about here. It went up to maximum rate.
Yeah.
So the rate of
The
reaction,
45 is the maximum rate.
which is here. And so what explain what happens, denaturing, you should see something along that line.
Yeah, so that part 3, explain what happens to the enzyme at temperatures above 37 degrees Celsius. Above 37 is past where we see the maximum rate of reaction, right? Because 37 will bring us about here, so, right? It's beyond the maximum rate of reaction. The enzyme is denatured. So what is going to happen to the enzyme is that the enzyme is going to be denatured. It's going to lose its shape and therefore no longer be able to catalyze the reaction.
Big up, Nandi. And the little extra sauce that you added. All right, let's go.
Yeah. So this question here is an oldie but a goodie. But didn't I have a slide before this one? No, with just the text alone.
Like this text?
Oh yeah, you can zoom in.
Yeah. We can fight up.
All right. So figure, I have to zoom for myself.
Let's read it for us.
So figure 1A and B below show how an experiment was set up to investigate how the rate of reaction of one of the enzymes of the human digestive system varies with temperature. So we're still looking at how temperature affects enzyme activity. 5 different temperatures were investigated. So you have 5 different test tubes there, that's 5 different temperatures over here, right? Each tube contains 4 drops of the enzyme solution. And 4 drops of the enzyme solution and 4 cm³ of starch. So because they're discussing starch, the enzyme that we're going to most likely be dealing with is going to be what?
Don't look at me. I teach maths.
Anybody? We're going to be looking at amylase.
Amylase, right. I would guess that one.
Yes, EH studies in the chat there on top of it. Right, so amylase is the enzyme that's going to be breaking down starch, and amylase will always break down starch into, what is the product?
Is it sucrose or glucose? Or is it none of that? None of the above?
None that you said. Is going to be, so amylase is the enzyme, is going to break, Xavier has it, it's going to be broken down into maltose, right? So knowing that is good, right? The next part says a white tile was prepared with drops of iodine as shown in figure 1B below. 1 drop of the mixture from each tube was removed at intervals and added to a drop of iodine on the tile. This was done every minute for 10 minutes. The results are shown in figure 1B by the blackened and non-blackened circles. So the figure 1A is showing you your 5 test tubes. Your 5 test tubes with your enzyme and your substrate mixed together at 0 degrees, 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, and 70 degrees Celsius. Figure B is showing you now, you have a white tile and you're using a white tile because you want to be able to visualize the color change very well, right? They put iodine on, so in the 10 drops under A to E, they have drops of iodine. So there are 10 drops of iodine for each one.
I've seen the curve
right?
thing again. I've seen the curve thing again.
So that's how they generate the data for the graph. You don't see it. So I am not seeing the screen that you have.
Oh, it's on slide 4.
Okay, I think I'm back. Right? So you have this here. So each you have 10 drops of iodine. So talking about before we start the experiment, right? You have 10 drops of iodine lined up with each test tube. Right? In the test tube, they mix starch and amylase. Starch is always going to react with iodine, yes, Xavier, to give you that blue-black color change, right? So iodine, once starch is present, iodine is going to react to give you that blue-black color change that's going to let you know that starch is still present, right? But the amylase in the test tube is there to break down the starch. If the starch is being broken down, if the starch is being done as the enzyme is doing its job, it's going to be removing starch from the test tube. Right? So as time passes, the amount of starch in each of the test tubes will be getting less and less as long as the amylase is working. Right? So what we are checking here now, so every minute they're going to combine the substrate, which is the starch, with the enzyme, which is the amylase, and they're going to check how long it takes for the starch to be broken down or for the starch to disappear. We will know that the starch disappears when we stop seeing a reaction with the iodine. We stop seeing that blue-black color change with the iodine, right? So after the first bit, so say this one at 0, well, let's look at the one at 10 degrees, right? The one at 10 degrees.
Yeah.
So you start the experiment, and then after 1 minute, you put your first drop. It's still turned blue-black, there's still starch. Starch present, starch present, starch present, present, until we take the one for the 9th minute now, and we don't see a blue-black color change. That means all the starch is broken down. There is no starch present to react with the iodine that is on the tile. Right? So this is how we are going to determine how quickly the enzyme is working. Because in all the test tubes, we've kept the amount of enzyme the same. We have kept the amount of substrate the same. And we vary the temperature. So the only thing that should be affecting how quickly the enzyme is working is the difference in temperature that each test tube is held at. Yeah? So they ask us to fill out the key, right? So part A says complete the key beside figure 1B to indicate the colors represented by the blackened and non-blackened circles, right? So the blackened and the non-blackened circles would represent the blackened would represent which one?
I answer that question.
Blue, black colors. Pardon?
Oh no, go ahead.
Right? And the unblackened circles or the non-blackened circles will represent the starting color for iodine, which is what? It's going to be yellow-brown. Yeah? So the blue-black color is going to be the positive when it remains yellow-brown, that is the negative test for starch. Right? So this question got well in the nitty-gritty of how well you understood this experiment, right? So with that, I think we are ready to move on to the next slide.
So positive test for starch, negative test for starch, complete the figure to indicate the colors represented by the black and non-black.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Next slide.
On the next slide, it says to explain why the color of the drops remain the same for the 10 minutes in row A and then row E. So looking at row A is the setup at 0 degrees Celsius. And every time they check for starch, starch was there. So that means what?
This had to be bio, boy, because we don't call that rows in maths, we call that columns. We don't call that row in. Rows go across, columns go down. What is this, CXC?
Don't fight me.
Yeah, the colors remain the same because the temperature was too low. The enzymes weren't helping out the situation.
Right? So it remained there because the starch, so the color is going to remain the same because starch was not broken down as the enzyme could not work at this juncture. Right? So remember, so you're saying it takes longer for the enzyme to be digested, but the enzyme is the one doing the digesting. It's the starch that is being digested by the enzyme. Right? In row E, we still have 10 dark dots, 10 blackened circles. So why in row E now would we still have starch being present after 10 minutes?
The enzyme getting rough up with the 40 to the 70 degrees denatured.
Right. So the in this case, well, I need to put, you still have to put that D. In terms of the color is there because the starch is still there. So starch was not broken down. The enzyme was denatured. Or you want to say that 70 degrees Celsius is beyond the optimum temperature for the enzyme. Right? So the enzyme was denatured at that point. So what substance would you expect to find in tube D after 2 minutes? So they're asking, you know, well, what does amylase break starch down into? So we agreed that was it's going to be your maltose. Right. Describe the test that could be carried out to find out if you were if you were correct at B part 2. What kind of test would you do to test for the presence of maltose?
Drink it. no, not drink it. I don't know what's the test of maltose. I forget. Is it Benedict's?
You would do the Benedict's test, right? So the Benedict's test, the test that you want to describe here is a test for reducing sugars, right? So your maltose is a reducing sugar. So you're going to be using the Benedict's reagent. The iodine test is for starch, so that will only tell you if starch is present or not. So now you want to look to test for the product after starch is broken down, and that is when you're going to use your Benedict's reagent, right? So we're going to
test
for reducing right? Using equal volumes of your test solution. See, that's going to come from your sample and Benedict's reagents, right? Very important with your test for reducing sugars and your test with Benedict's reagent that you have to heat in order to be able to observe the color change, right? So you're going to place in water bath or heat for 5 minutes and observe, right? If it is that maltose is present, what color change would we expect to see?
Yeah, class, so they hold this one down for me.
right? So Benedict's reagent is, so if present, Benedict's reagent is blue, a nice pretty blue, right? So if it is, if maltose is present, you would see that brick red color, right? But brick red, you will see brick red if there is a lot of maltose present. So there are actually a wide range of colors that you can see. If there's just a little bit of maltose present, then it will turn to green. A little bit more, it will look yellow. A little bit more, it will look orange. And then if there's a lot present, you will see that final red color. So the Benedict's test can kind of tell you or give you a kind of guess. It's semi-quantitative in that you can assume the amount of the reducing sugar that is present, right? So sometimes if they tell you see a color, so sometimes they test that. They will say that they didn't say that they see a red, they didn't go from blue to red, but they will say it will go from blue to green. You have to know that a change from blue to green is still a positive result. It's just that it's a very small amount of that reducing sugar present. Yeah?
Excellent.
So using the information from the experiment, figures 1A and B, complete the graph to show the effect of temperature on time taken for the reaction between the starch and the enzyme to be completed, right? So what you have is that at 0 degrees Celsius, it took 10 minutes. Yeah? So you plot that point there. At the 10 degrees Celsius, it took 8 minutes. Well, it could have taken 8 minutes and change, but we don't know because we're going in 1 minute intervals, right? So at 20 degrees Celsius, it took 4 minutes. At 30, it took 2 minutes. We don't have information for 40, 50, 40, 60, and 70 would be somewhere in between, and 70, we're back at 10 minutes, right? So yeah, you plot your data points and you draw your curve again. Sorry, is that undo? Yeah.
It's interesting that this curve is like a reverse because they actually do need time taken for the reaction to be completed. So you kind of have the reverse vibe.
That is yes. So the reason why I put this question in compared to the first one is that sometimes they give you a graph and on the x-axis, sorry, on the y-axis is rate of reaction, and sometimes they give you it with time taken. If it's going to be time taken, you're going to observe a U-shaped graph, right? Because we know from the previous graph, as temperature increase, the rate of the reaction increases. But this is showing you the same thing, because if the rate of the reaction is increasing, it means that the time that is going to be taken for the reaction to be complete is going to decrease. Yeah? So in this graph, you're going to get a U-shaped graph where your optimum temperature will be indicated by the shortest time taken for the reaction to occur, because that is where you would observe the fastest rate. Right? So the shortest time is the same as the fastest rate. If they give you rate of reaction on your y-axis, then you're looking for the highest point on the graph. If they give you time taken on your y-axis, you're looking for the shortest amount of time. Yeah? So part 2 asking, at what temperature did the reaction take place most rapidly? Is going to take place most rapidly at 30 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, 30 according to the graph.
Right? So it's 30 according to what we have. And that's the thing with experiments. Now, we know that likely the optimum temperature should be higher around, say, closer to 40, right? Around 37 thereabouts, right? So the more temperature variations that you do, the more accurate your graph will be. But here you could only generate the graph based on the temperature points that they give us, the intervals that they used, right? What would you expect to happen if at the end of the 10-minute period, the contents from tube A and E were brought to 30 degrees Celsius and then tested with iodine? So remember, row A was the one at 0 degrees Celsius that remained, you got starch after 10 minutes. So what it's saying is that you're going to raise the temperature from 0 degrees to 30 degrees, and then you're going to test use your iodine test to test for starch.
I have my suspicions.
Right. So what's happening in tube A?
Tube A, we'd expect the same thing that happened in the middle tube at 30 degrees to take place, because the enzymes will just wake up and say, all right, it's not cool anymore. Let me do what we had to do. In tube E, them enzymes then up denatured. So them ain't coming back. There's no hope for them enzymes. So nothing is going to happen in tube E.
Right.
But
so
I put that in nice words for the examiner.
Right. So then they ask, what would you expect to happen when you test with iodine? You're going to when you test for iodine with the contents from tube A, you're going to expect that there's going to be no color change, right? So it's going to remain that yellow brown, right? So there would be no color change.
So it's very important to answer exactly what the question is asking, like what would happen in the tube, or what, or describe the why it is happening, right. Or yeah.
So they're asking you, you're testing with iodine, and what is going to be different. So when you test with iodine, with the first one, there's going to be no color change, i.e. that it remained yellow-brown, as the starch would be broken down the active enzyme. Right? So we can get into a little bit of physics to understand why temperature really increases the rate of the reaction for enzymes. Right? So, and have a 12-hour physics crash course coming up too.
Yeah, the 12-hour physics is sometime away though. Not well, Saturday, tomorrow is maths. The following Saturday is nothing. Maybe HSB, who knows? I don't know when HSB exam is. And then the following Saturday after that is physics. Yeah, so if you're using physics for temperature, that's kind of going into the kinematic theory of matter. So you have increased rate of collision.
Right. So your enzymes have what we call an active site, right? And that active site is usually a very unique shape to the shape of the substrate that it has to break down. So amylase is going to have an active site that matches the shape of starch, right? So, and for them to actually, for amylase to be able to catalyze the reaction, then the starch has to collide with the active site of the amylase for that to be able to happen, right? So as temperature increases, the amylase molecules and the starch molecules gain energy. They're moving around with more energy. They're moving around faster, and they're colliding more. So more collisions mean you increase the chance of there's going to be a collision between the active site of the amylase and the starch for the reaction to be done. So as temperature increases, those collisions increase, and therefore the rate of the reaction is increasing. Yeah? With tube E now, right? At that 70 degrees Celsius, the enzyme is completely denatured, which means that there is no coming back for it. It's a permanent, it done bend up, and that is that, right? The car right off. So with that, there's no coming back. So even if you bring it back to ideal temperature, right, it's not going to work. The starch is going to remain. So then you will observe a color change from yellow brown. Anytime I'm describing color change, I always like to give the starting color and the ending color, right? Just to be very clear. So I'm going to see a color change from yellow brown to blue black as the is no longer functional. Yeah. So using the information on page 2 to describe the procedure used to set up this investigation. So they are asking you for the procedure that they use to carry out the experiment. And they don't carry out the experiment. Like, what you really asking me for that, right? But anyway, so they want you to give them the procedure by placing each step in the correct order in which it should take place to be carried out to ensure accuracy. Include one precaution that you would take, right? So what if you...
5 marks, right? Wow.
Yeah, so a mark for each step, and then for one mark for the precaution that you would take, right? So the thing is that we want to test the effective temperature, and how we create different temperature environments in a lab is by using water baths, right? So the first thing that you want to do is set up the water baths 0, 10, 20, 30, and 70 degrees Celsius. And you want to place, so my writing gonna be all over here, and place one test tube with, you remember the amounts? It was 4 drops of the enzyme and 4 cm cube of the starch, right? So obviously this could be spread out into a lot more steps, right? But it's 4 steps to give us, so we're condensing the whole thing into 4, right? Containing 4 drops enzyme and cm cube of starch solution, right? The next thing you're going to have to do is you're going to need to prepare that white tile. The reason why you're preparing that white tile with the 10 drops of iodine in advance is because those 1 minute intervals goes by really quickly. So by having it all laid out, you could keep on your time markings to increase accuracy. By doing the white tile in advance with the iodine, it will allow you to keep taking the measurements on the correct time intervals, right? You're going to prepare your white tile with drops of as shown in B, and this is the experiment to be going on. Use their thing, right? So sorry, one correction I'm going to make here is that remove that from there. We're going to put we're not adding the starch one time. So you're just putting the enzyme and setting it at the different temperatures, right? In step 3, you want to place your 4 cm cube of starch solution into the test tube in at 0 degrees Celsius and start the timer, placing 1 drop of the mixture on 1 drop of iodine at 1 minute intervals. Right? So once you've done that, then you're going to repeat you're going to repeat step 3 for remaining until color change no longer seen.
Oh boy, Akili boy,
Right?
we fighting long this 5 marks here.
No, the thing is, because they could be very picky and you don't know what it is they're looking for. And to be quite honest, this is a more than 4-step procedure, right? The one precaution that you want to take here is that the precaution is that one, you're going to ensure that they keep stirring the mixture as the reaction is taking place, right? Because they see that they gave you stirring rods, right? Next, you are going to want to ensure that the pH of the reaction for all of the tubes are the same, because you know that temperature can affect them, you know that pH can affect it. So making sure that that is consistent, right? So be sure the mixed should want to equal. So ensure that stuff, right? You want also want to ensure sample is taken exactly at the 1 minute intervals. Any one of those, right? Explain the importance of stirring the mixture. It's going to be important to stir the mixture as it's going on, because you want to ensure that when you take the sample, the amount of starch you're going to test there is representative of the entire tube and not just one section or region of the test tube. Yeah, so the stirring is just making sure that your sample is representative of the entire tube. Yeah. So this is a separate paper, right? This one goes on to saying, state 2 reasons why enzymes are referred to as biological catalysts. So we kind of alluded to that at first, where we're going to look at each term separately. It's going to be biological because it's going to be a molecule produced by the body, right? And the fact that it's a catalyst is going to speed up reaction. And very importantly, while remaining changed in process. So that's very important to learn about your enzymes. Your enzymes, after they catalyze a reaction, they're good to go. Nothing happened to them, so they could go on and catalyze other substrates over and over and over. They're reusable, right? So that part about being unchanged, we had to emphasize that. So coming back again to another question, figure 1 shows the results obtained from an investigation of the effect of now pH on the action of the enzyme amylase. So it's still the same enzyme, but now we're looking at how it's going to be affected by different pH environments. Right? So looking at the next slide.
So what's happening is that we have a lot of people messaging to sign up for the 12-hour crash courses. So, and the AdMaths is tomorrow from 12, and the bio is, well, Sunday from 9. So we kind of have an emergency at our hands to get through all those messages in time for the in time for class. But we'll get through them.
Right. So guys, it's not pepsin that we're talking about here because it's specified that you're looking at amylase. All right. So next slide here. Yeah, so how's his performance? Yeah? One day to aspire to those levels. Yeah. So the first part of this question again is to record the results presented on the graph in a suitable table. We're not going to go through the whole table again, but I just put it there to show you that it's something very common that they ask you to do, right? So you can switch to the next slide.
This one here?
Right. Yeah, so this slide here is just showing you that they ask you to do the same thing with the table again. So this is going to be your, that will be your first column. Second column. Ooh. Column get a little sidetracked there. Right? And you just pull off easy.
The points, you pull off the X's, the X's.
Say that again?
So you just pull off the points, those X's, and you put them in a table with the columns. So you say columns this time.
So that,
I the right thing.
no, I always call them columns, It is CXC, remember? Okay. It is us against them. It's not we had to keep the sides straight. Yeah. Okay.
But let me just clarify to the chat. I don't own no grand piano and no chimney in my house. That this is you can see this is concrete wall, and this is a green screen. Right, so that's how it's looking like that. Right,
yeah. So yeah, as I said, the easiest thing is to use the plot points that they have already, but you can technically use any pH. You can use 4.5, 5.5 if you wish, but make your life easy, right? So I'm not going to draw through that table again, right? So we could move next. So they're asking now with reference, next slide. With reference to the rate of enzyme activity, we have to suggest 2 reasons for the shape of the graph during each of the following pH ranges, right? Yeah, so the first range is from pH 4 to 5, which is the first part of the graph here. Now, very importantly, right? Cohen?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just trying to deal with the overflow. Go ahead.
I need the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So they say, very importantly here with this question, they said with reference to the rate of enzyme activity. But the graph that they gave us here is in terms of time taken. So when they ask you what is happening between pH 4 to 5, between this range here, you cannot go on to talk about the time taken is decreasing because it's not in terms of time taken, but you have to give it in terms of the rate. Yeah? So between pH 4 and 5, we see that the time taken for the amylase to completely break down the starch is decreasing, which means that the rate of the enzyme activity is actually increasing in that pH window. Yeah? So it's just about paying attention here. So you have to give your answer in terms of rate. All right. So for this rate, the rate of the reaction is increasing as the for decrease. So that relationship between the time taken for the reaction to complete as well as to rate of reaction has to be very intimately understood, right? So the rate of reaction is increasing as the time taken for completion of the reaction is decreasing as the optimum pH is approached. So we always observe. So it's going to less time taken, and that is because we're getting closer and closer to the optimum pH for this particular enzyme, right? Between pH, the range from 6 to 8, we have the opposite happening, where we're going to have the rate of, now the rate of reaction going to be.
What's that?
If this comes to exam, yeah, the rate of reaction here is now going to be decreasing, right? Because time taken for completion increase.
So you know, I do bio in 2005 distinction, but somehow I remember enzymes, but I do remember all these graphs part in enzymes. So they're bringing it like this.
So sometimes they don't ask you about the experiment or give you the graphs, and you could just talk about theory. They might ask you like, how does temperature affect enzyme activity, and you could just give them a nice little explanation. But a lot of times they bring iterations of these experiments. There are a bunch of different particles I can pull from where they give you the graph, where they and ask you intricate details about the experiments. They're pulling that out a lot now, a lot more now, right? So as the pH is increased beyond, optimum, your enzyme activity decreases. Yeah. So everybody kind of always says that, okay, you have some physics in bio, you have math in bio, you have chemistry in bio. But generally, when you're studying these things, they're not ideally supposed to be studied in these separate silos, but it can intertwine and lend to the understanding of each other, right? So if you're doing other science topics, sometimes a lot of the topics can help you out here and so on and so forth. I mean, you can do it without knowledge of the rest. You just have to, but it gets a little easier when there's overlap, right? So they're asking to suggest one reason why the graph has a U shape. So why are we seeing a U shape this time? It's going to be a U shape because you're only going to see that reduced time, the fastest time for the completion of the reaction around the optimum temperature. You all pressured Mr. Springer into changing his background.
Yeah, but brick solid, brick pan brick.
Right? But if you remember, this question is no longer about temperature, but it's about pH. Right?
Right.
So one reason for the U is that the rate of is lower, below, and above the optimum pH.
All right, so with enzymes, the graph could be U or the opposite. It could be maximum or minimum. The x-axis could be temperature or pH.
Mm-hmm.
The right, the y-axis could be rate of reaction in milligram per minute or whatever, or it could be the time taken for the amylase to break down the SAT, some kind of thing that would make the graph go into U.
Right.
Instead.
So,
Got it.
and how they can measure the rate of reaction, they can measure the rate by how quickly it takes for the substrate to be reduced, or they can measure the rate by how quickly the product is produced.
Right, right.
So one way you can check how quickly the starch disappears, or you can check how quickly the maltose appears.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's different iterations that it can come. So if from the graph, they want you to predict how many seconds it will take for amylase to completely break down starch at a pH of 5.5. So that's easy. You come to your x-axis, you find your 5.5, you carry it up to the curve, and you carry it across. Yeah? You're muted, Cohen, if you're talking to us.
Oh, sorry. 24 seconds. I was 24 seconds.
5.5. I would say that's more 30.
Oh yeah, well not 30, but 28. I didn't know what she scaled. Yes, I just assumed that this was 30.
Right. So with these sort of questions, they usually allow like a little range, especially when they do give you these small grid lines to guide you. But it can't be too. Determine the optimum pH of amylase. The optimum pH of amylase is going to be when it works the
best.
The best or the fastest, right? So you're going to look for the lowest point on the graph when it's a graph of with time taken. You would look for the highest point on the graph if it was a graph with rate of reaction on the y-axis. Right? So you tell it by different points at different times. Yeah? So it's going to be 6. Yeah. Predict the pH at which amylase would completely break down starch in 80 seconds. So now you will just go to the y-axis first.
This is some strong maths here, Akili.
I tell you, there's a chemistry, there's a little physics, there's a little math in the mix, but you all like to coast on the biological sciences. Yeah? So we get a pH of 4.4 there. So with that, we can move on. Then they go back now to asking you again about the procedure, a procedure that can be used to investigate the effect of pH on the time taken for amylase to digest, right? So what are some important components we need to have here? If we want to test or investigate the effect of pH, then we need to create different pH environments. So we no longer need multiple water baths anymore. Now we need, like in the test tube, we need one test tube at pH 4, one test tube at pH 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we need to vary the pH environments. And how we do that is using buffers, right? So you use buffers in order to create a different pH environment in each of the test tubes. So we need like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 different pH environments here. So you want to have a variety of buffers. So this is a 5 mark. Again, all they like to tell me, I like to fight down for the 5 marks. But in biology, it's really about your detail. So we're going to have to include it. Right?
Actually, I feel the talk this one out to me because I know you're gonna fill up all these lines.
Right. So what you had to have,
I try to see right now. I have a 12-hour crash course tomorrow.
You have 5 test tubes. In each test tube, you will put a pH that will create an environment, a buffer that will create a pH environment of 4, of 5, of 6, of 7, and 8. very importantly, you want to add your enzyme to that first. You do not put the enzyme and the substrate in the same test tube until you are ready to time, right? Because from the time you mix the two, the amylase is not going to be like, well, the time ain't start yet, so wait until you're ready. From the time you mix the two, the amylase is going to start breaking down the starch. So you only want the two of them together. You put the two of them together and you start the timer. So you have to do it one at a time. Yeah? So you have your 5 different pH environment test tubes. You have and then you add your amylase and your substrate. You time that, you finish that one, and you do it for each of the different pH environments. Yeah? So that's practically it. The only last thing, if we could skip to slide 16. You go to slide 16. I included this one just to know that amylase isn't the only enzyme that they ask you about. There's another enzyme known as catalyze that you also need to be familiar with. And catalyze is found in the liver, and it breaks down hydrogen peroxide into water and oxygen. Right? So hydrogen peroxide is H2 now into water and oxygen, right? By your catalyze. Catalase enzyme, and it's really important because catalase hydrogen peroxide is produced by a whole bunch of chemical reactions in the body, and it's really toxic. So the catalase in the liver detoxifies that hydrogen peroxide into very safe water and oxygen. So when that happens, it's an effervescent reaction, meaning that you see bubbles, right? And the bubbles are going to come from the fact that oxygen is a gas. So that's why in this setup here, they did the glowing splint test, and the gas that's going to be given off is going to relight the glowing splint because that gas is oxygen, right? So the same thing about how temperature and pH is going to affect the activity of the enzyme remains the same. It's just that they can test it about catalase instead of amylase. So instead of, you wouldn't be testing for, you wouldn't use the iodine test in this case because it's not about starch or anything here now. You're looking, the common end product that you test for is that oxygen, and you test for oxygen by that using the glowing splint. Yeah? So it's just those two that you have to know like experiments about. But obviously in the digestive system, you would meet a variety of enzymes that you have to know what the substrate and products are. Yeah? Just those two. So with that, I feel like we could basically wrap there.
All right.
With an understanding of experiments to do with enzymes and how enzymes are affected by temperature and pH.
Okay, so if anybody here messages student have to join the bio or admats, remember it'll take a little while, but we'll get back to you on that. We have admins still working into the night right now, cracking through those messages. So we'll get back to you. It'll take some time. And then we have a whole swarm of people registering for the maths. Because, yeah, well, if you don't know, well, actually, you know the news, maths people to get knocked out. So we're doing over, I shouldn't say doing over, the people in my class getting it free, but I'm doing an additional paper one crash course. But not, that will be sometime on the 10th or something, I believe, the 10th of June. 10th of June. So that's some time away. So yeah, so you can join Miss Akili and also Miss Crystal, she's the next bio teacher at the student hub. You can join them on Sunday. They will be taking it from 9 in the morning to 9 in the night. And when you know your bio in the morning, that's the ideal way to run up to your bio exams. If you need a little extra push, message now so we can get you in. To that, right? So you may have to, most people with online transfers could get through one time, but some people are going to the bank or making some kind of arrangement, I don't know, or credit card. We have different methods you can get through. So thanks, Akili. I know you are probably just as tired as I am to come through and pull it off. Shout out to Shout out to a dog in the background who was giving me some accompaniment as well. Stella is always there. Stella is one. Stella is always there. Gave me a performance. I said I was going to do a little admats after this, but maybe I might. I would. I'm going to do a little admats after this. We're going to talk about the logarithm. So look out, people. I'm going to jump back in the next 10 minutes. I'll probably do that for half an hour to an hour. And then 12-hour crash course tomorrow. Love and blessings.
Bye.